Hello, welcome to Microfiche Microphone. I'm Micah, and on this channel, we look at microfiche from the past, old newspaper articles in the public domain. We look at them with our modern eyes, our modern perspective, and see what we can learn from them. On this microfiche time capsule, we are looking back at the Juvenile Instructor from January 1866. And this is 15th of January, because we already read the one from the 1st of January. Just in case you missed it, I am starting a new series on reading out, this is my true passion is church history, and it's something that I know more about than I think the average person does. Church history from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I just find it fascinating, and I find the people very interesting, and if this isn't your thing, obviously, that's fine, but this is where I wanted to go, and since it's my channel, I get to make these decisions. So, anyways, so we are just going to read through it. I don't anticipate that I will always read the entire thing like I have been. However, I do really, really love it, so, this is me following my heart. So, let's take a look. Here we go. Okay, poetry for the Juvenile Instructor to children. Children, obey your parents and give them honor due, is God's command with promise of life and blessings too. The fleeting hours of childhood and youth are golden hours, in which to lay foundations for manhood's noble powers. In them we form the habits which mark our future years, which fill the heart with gladness or wet the cheek with tears. Seek while the scenes of childhood and youth are moving on, to store your minds with wisdom and cherish reason's dawn. Shun every evil practice and set your standards high. You certainly will reach it if you don't cease to try. In right be energetic and never yield to wrong. The right is sure to triumph, although prevented long. The good, the wise, the noble, be sure to emulate. Be wisely great in goodness, and you'll be truly great. E.R. Snow. GSL City, January 1866. So, E.R. Snow is Eliza R. Snow, in case you were not aware. She is quite revered for her poetry. This one is a bit, I don't know, it's a little bit over the top. Children, obey your parents. Having that be the first thing they say, you immediately lost all of children. This is not appealing to children. This is appealing to adults who have children, who are my children need to read this, So I'm not super into it because I don't think most kids will read it at all. They'll skim over it and be like, yeah, whatever, I just don't think that this is appealing to children. If you, try to think of it from their perspective better, then, But I can totally picture a strict adult reading this to a child who they think isn't following one of these, and I don't really like that. I don't know. I don't feel like it's very appealing in general, but also, some of the advice is good, store your minds with wisdom, shun evil practice, be energetic, but the thing is, the right is sure to triumph is absolutely not true. So you're kind of setting them up to think something that's incorrect. Anyways, let's move on. Biography, Joseph Smith the Prophet, continued. So last time it was a very vivid depiction of the first vision. So let's see what we're going to talk about today, which was almost entirely directly from Joseph Smith history. So I feel like it's pretty accurate. I do appreciate the accuracy that's in here. Sometimes they're a little over the top, but that's okay. Anyways, we have described to you in the previous number of the Instructor the course Joseph Smith took to obtain knowledge. The Apostle James has said, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God. Joseph believed his words, and in childlike simplicity had asked, and the Lord had answered his prayer. He had the privilege of learning from heavenly beings that which he had sought in vain to obtain from man. As we have told you, the light which surrounded those holy beings was most beautiful and brilliant. As it descended from the heavens and came near the tops of the trees where Joseph was praying, the whole grove was lit up in a most glorious manner. The light was so very bright that he expected it would burn the leaves and the limbs of the trees when it touched them. But when he saw that they were not burned by it, he felt no fear about it hurting him. When it rested upon him and he was surrounded by it, his sensations were very peculiar, but very pleasing and joyous. It was when the light rested upon him that he saw the heavenly beings. They exactly resembled each other in their features and appearance. As soon as Joseph was able to speak, he asked the personages who stood above him in the light which of all the sects was right, and which he should join. It was his desire to obtain knowledge respecting this important matter that prompted him to go out alone and pray to God. He fully expected that there was one church on the earth which was true and acknowledged by the Lord. But he was told that he must join none of them, for they were all wrong, and the personage who talked to him said that their creeds or systems of religions were an abomination in his sight, and the preachers of those doctrines were all corrupt. They draw near to me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They teach for doctrines the commandments of men, having a form of godliness, but they deny the power thereof. He again commanded him not to join with any of these churches, and he was promised that the true doctrine, the everlasting gospel, should be made known to him at some future time. Many other things were told to him, and the vision was withdrawn. Every one of our young readers can think how delighted Joseph must have been at receiving this glorious and precious visit from these holy beings. He had no longer to look here and there for truth and the true people of God. Knowledge had been given to him which he could depend upon, and he no doubt felt that it would be a pleasure to him to tell what the Lord had revealed to him to all the world, if they would listen to him. But the world would neither listen to nor believe him. This latter statement may appear strange to you, children. You cannot perhaps understand why a person would not be glad to hear such truth as Joseph could tell them. After so many generations had passed away without a voice from heaven being heard, and without any person being able to say, "Thus saith the Lord," you would probably think that men would be glad to hear that the Lord had spoken, and would crowd around Joseph with open ears to hear what the Lord had said. Eli was a very old man, and a high priest who had been acknowledged by the Lord, and Samuel was a very young boy. Yet when God spoke to Samuel, he told Eli what the Lord had said. Eli listened to him with kindness and respect. But the people did not do so with Joseph. They did not have that regard for God and his word that Eli, with all his faults, had. Truly, had the Lord said to Joseph that they were corrupt, and that while they drew near to him with their lips, their hearts were far from him, Joseph soon proved this to his satisfaction. Some few days after he had this vision, he happened to be in company with one of those preachers who had been so very active in the religious excitement which we alluded to in the first number of the Instructor. This preacher belonged to a sect called Methodists. Their conversation turned upon the subject of religion, and Joseph told him about the vision which he had received. Now this man thought he preached to everybody about God, and professed to be his servant, never had seen him or heard him speak. Neither had he ever known any person who had ever seen him or heard him speak. The last men who had known God had been killed hundreds of years before he was born, by the people who then lived, because they declared God's word, which made the wicked angry. All that he knew, therefore, about God he learned from the Bible, which was written by men who had known him. Instead of being thankful to learn that God had once more spoken to man, this preacher treated Joseph's description of his vision with contempt. He said that it was of the devil, and that there was no such thing as visions or revelations at that time. They had all ceased since the apostles of Jesus had passed away, and there could never be any more of them. Boys, you can imagine how disappointed Joseph was at hearing this language from a man who professed to have such love for God. It was a fact that he had had a vision, and he knew it, and all the preachers in the world could not make it otherwise. Though all the world should oppose him and deny that he had seen anything, Joseph knew that he had both seen a light and heard a voice speaking to him. What could he do? He could not believe this preacher when he said that all he had told him was of the devil, and that there never would be any more visions or revelations. Okay, that stops in kind of a weird place. I do appreciate that it's worded in such a way that makes it easy to understand. These are all continued in the story in Joseph Smith history, so I feel like it's pretty reliable information. I do also appreciate that they drew the parallel to Eli and Samuel. Yeah, because it's difficult for older people to listen to younger people as an authority. Yeah? So I can understand that, but it's also partly because it's not only a younger person, it's a child. He was a farmer. He was a little farmer boy. What does he know about the Bible? Like, other than the fact that he's read it. Like, I can understand where the preacher is coming from as well. So I get it. Anyways, we're not, commenting on Joseph Smith's actual history, just like the article on it. So, but I think it's a good article for children and can help them to, relate to it. I do object a little tiny bit to some of the language used because I feel like the vocabulary was a little bit too advanced for children. even one of our young readers can think how delighted Joseph must have been at receiving this glorious and precious visit from these holy beings. That's very flowery language to talk to a child about. Like, let's get rid of some of the adjectives and just, talk to children in their own language. That's all. That's the only objection I have. All right, Little George. Oh, I love these. Okay, so I know that I've seen these before, and these are so cool. So these are just little snippets of like little short stories about a person named George, and they call them Little George. And at first when I was reading them, I thought it might be George Buchanan, and then I looked it up, and it turns out this is George D. Watt. George D. Watt was the clerk of a conference for a lot of years. So he was very good at shorthand, and he was good at like writing things down and documenting things. That was his strength. So anyways, he was, he lived at the same time as I would say, who lived around the same time? Like Erastus Snow, he was around during the time like Brigham Young, and I'll have to look up when he came into the church because he was British. But anyways, I don't know that much about his life, but I love these little stories he tells about his childhood because he had a rough childhood, but he kind of tried to make the best of it. So I do really love these stories. So let's read about Little George. This is George D. Watt. Okay, a true story. Little George had no father to buy him new clothes, and bread and butter or toys to play with, for his father died in a far-off distant land when he was very young, so he had to trust to kind strangers to give him bread when he was hungry and old clothes to wear. Little George had no home to rest in when he was tired of playing. He had no little chair to sit in, no good fire to sit by, and no nice little crib or bed to sleep in. But he had to lie down by the side of a wall or by the side of a house to sleep and rest, and trust to be fed and clothed by him who feeds the birds and fishes and clothes the flowers of the field. While the sun shone and everything was warm and bright, little George was cheerful and happy, and found plenty of boys and girls to play with. Many of them were kind to him and would let him play with their toys, and give him pieces of bread and pie to eat. Sometimes bad boys would beat him, and they were not afraid to do so, for he had no father to tell, and no brothers to take his part. Told you he had a rough childhood. When wicked boys would thus abuse him, he would go away by himself and cry for a long time and wish that he were dead. And he would try to pray to God in his trouble, for his mother taught him, when he was a very little boy, to pray, and to believe that whatever he asked God for would be given him. And so he would pray that God would forgive those bad boys, and then he would feel better and go to his play again, for he could not remember any wrongs done to him only for a short time. That's because he was really young. When night came and all his playmates were gone to their homes, little George would sit under a window and cry, and wish that he had a home to go to, and kind friends to give him bread and milk to his supper, and wash his face and comb his hair and put him into a nice clean bed to sleep. Sometimes strangers would take him into their kitchens and give him some crusts of bread to eat and let him sit by the fire or lie on the floor all night. Then he was glad and thankful to God, whom his mother had taught him to thank for everything. Sometimes he would have to crawl into an outhouse or cuddle up in a corner all alone, and then he would cry himself to sleep. But when he awoke in the morning and all was light and gay, he forgot his troubles and warmed himself in the sunshine. One morning he took off his clothes to bathe in a shallow place in a canal with some other boys, and they proved to be bad boys, for they ran away with all his clothes and left him in the water. This was a sore trial for little George, for he had remained naked until late in the afternoon, when a kind lady found him crying behind a wall, where he had been nearly all day without anything to eat, and she brought him some clothing and a large piece of bread and butter. This had been an unlucky day for little George, and night coming on he felt very lonely, and wished that he were in heaven, and thought that it would not be wrong for him to drown himself in the canal, and then he would not again have his clothes stolen away from him by bad boys. He got on to the edge of a canal boat where the water was deep to throw himself into the water, and was just going to bid good-bye to the little sparrows that were chirping near him, when he saw that he had not eaten all his bread and butter which the lady had given him. So he sat down to eat it before he jumped into the water to drown himself. But by the time he had done eating his bread and butter he felt much better, and prayed that he might live to be a man, and find good and kind friends in a coming day to love him. So he did not drown himself, but lived and found the good and loving friends his little heart pined for. There are many thousands of little boys and girls in the big cities of the world that are as destitute of friends and comfort as little George was. How is it with you? Have you a kind father and good mother, a generous uncle, a gentle aunt, a loving friend to provide for you with a home to live in, a bed to sleep upon, clothing to wear, and food to eat? Ought you not to love them very much and do their bidding without a cross thought or angry word? Have you school teachers to teach you how to read and write, and good ministers of the truth to show you the way to heaven? Then be thankful to God, my little children, for all the good and kind friends, and for your comfortable and happy homes, and you will hear more about little George in the future. Uncle George. I really love this. It is a little triggering, and I apologize. I didn't realize that there was thoughts of suicide. I couldn't remember that from. I have read many of these, but I don't know if I had read this particular one all the way through. Yeah, he was homeless. He was homeless as like a 5-year-old child. It's crazy to me to think that this 5-year-old, I'm guessing his age because he remembers it. Yeah. But he was very young, and it like the 5-year-old having thoughts of suicide because someone had stolen his clothes. Like, that's crazy to me. That is a 5-year-old, like, I'm just, like I said, I'm guessing his age, is just having those, like, he must have been a very deep thinker to think, life would be much easier if I didn't have to struggle so much. But the thing is, after he ate his food, he felt better. And that's very much a childhood logic of, like, before I kill myself, I'm going to eat something. But, like, the thing is, many of us who are going through some really, really difficult times, if we only just had something to take care of our immediate needs, we would feel so much better to the point where we wouldn't want to kill ourselves. And that is 100% true. It's crazy to me to think about, but this is a true story, and this really happened to this individual. And, this is a reminder of take care of the people around you, and if you do, you might actually save their life. You might literally save their life. So, just a quick reminder. So, now these little, snippets are very often used to, fill in spaces in the newspaper. So these snippets are used to fill in spaces, fill in little gaps to make the newspaper look prettier. So, but yeah, they do their job. So, a jolly life. Insects generally must lead a truly jovial life. Think what it must be to lodge in a lily. Imagine a palace of ivory or pearl with a pillar of silver and capitals of gold, all inhaling such a perfume as never rose from human censer. Fancy again the fun of tucking yourself up for the night in the folds of a rose, rocked to sleep by the gentle sigh of the summer air, nothing to do when you awake but to wash yourself in a dewdrop and fall to and eat your bedclothes. That's funny. I would not like the life of an insect, especially since it's so very, very short. All right. The sea devil. The wonders of the mighty ocean are many and various. They who traverse it in great ships see strange sights and many evidences of the greatness and wisdom of God. The varieties of fish which swarm in the rivers, lakes, seas, and oceans are not among the least wonderful and instructive things that are to be found in the water. Fishes are the same to the sea and ocean that animals are to the land. They have a world of their own in which they live and move. Some of them are very small, some very pretty, some harmless, some good to be eaten by man. Some are exceedingly large, and some are very destructive, terrible monsters indeed. Okay. It's a bit of fear-mongering, yeah? Like, be afraid of the ocean. Our illustration represents one of these terrible fishes. It is one of the horned ray species, more commonly known as sea devils or ocean vampires. Jeez. Some of these fish grow to be an enormous size, 30 or 40 feet in length, and very weighty. It is said that they have found so large... It is said that they have been found so large as to require 7 yoke of oxen to draw one of them ashore. Many anecdotes are related to the strength of this fish. In the Natural History of the State of New York, the statement is made that it has been known to seize the cable of a small vessel at anchor and draw the vessel several miles with great velocity. We hope this illustration and brief sketch will incite our young readers to seek after knowledge concerning the seas and oceans and their inhabitants, as well as other branches of study. As they increase in knowledge, they may see in all the hand of the all-wise Creator made manifest. Okay, that last bit was absolutely unhelpful. It was completely irrelevant. I feel like they could have stopped half a paragraph earlier. The giant rays? Okay. Sea devils or ocean vampires. What is a sea devil? Sorry, we're going to have to fact check this. Are any very large ray, especially any species of the genus Manta or Cephaloptera, any large cephalopod, the anglerfish? Well, I know the anglerfish. Okay, so there are 4 different things that are referred to as sea devils. The larger species reaches 7 meters or 23 feet in width. That's ginormous. Holy cow, I didn't know that they got that big. This picture that I'm showing is definitely not the largest one, because this one is so clearly like not that much bigger than a person, I would say. Well, obviously it is, but like not that much big. I would say 3 meters maybe. I'm just guessing, which is what, 16 feet? So like that's just a rough estimate based on the size of the people next to it. But like, manta rays apparently can get really big. Anyways, crazy. All right, moving on. Who are the Indians? Yes, racism. I apologize, there was a lot of racism, especially against Native Americans at the time. This is a product of the time more than anything else. In the last one, it wasn't too bad. They mentioned, like, there was a few phrases, though, that were bad. But in general, they were talking about, like, the, Book of Mormon background of the Indians. So let's see if that's what they're going to talk about here, or not. We'll see. It makes me very nervous when they talk about races. Okay. After Lehi had enjoyed his glorious vision and had seen and heard the great and wondrous things which were manifested unto him in it, he went about among his friends and the inhabitants of Jerusalem generally, telling them what the Lord had made known unto him, and that unless they repented of all their wickedness and humbled themselves as little children before God, their beautiful city would be destroyed, and themselves, with their king, their wives, and their children, would be taken captives by the king of Babylon. But instead of thanking him for his kind warning, the Jews hated him and sought to kill him, as they had done all the prophets and good men who lived before him. Our youthful readers will, very likely, wonder why the Jews should wish to kill Lehi, when he had done them no harm, but on the contrary had endeavored to do them good, by telling them of the dreadful miseries and calamities that awaited them, and how they might escape them. The reason was that the Jews, both men and women, had become very wicked. They did not like anyone to tell them about or reprove them on account of their sins. The Jews had no disposition to do right or forsake their sins, so they became angry at and hated anyone who told them about their secret murders, their whoredoms, adulteries, robberies, oppressions, lyings, and hypocrisy, just as some naughty boys and girls feel angry sometimes at anybody who tells them of their faults. The Lord, seeing that the Jews would kill Lehi if he remained among them, warned him in a dream to take his family and leave Jerusalem and travel into the wilderness, that is, an uninhabited country, in the direction that the Lord should tell them. This warning Lehi promptly obeyed, leaving his house with most of his furniture and effects, together with all his gold and silver that he did not spend for his traveling outfit, and he was possessed of a large amount of money and other property. He took his family with him and traveled towards the east side of the Red Sea. Lehi's family, when they left Jerusalem, consisted of himself and his wife Sariah and their 4 sons, Laman, Lemuel, Nephi, and Sam. Now, Laman and Lemuel were wicked and rebellious against their father, and did not believe that God had spoken to him and told him to leave Jerusalem. So they murmured at him for taking them away from their comfortable home and their riches to die, as they thought, in the wilderness. But Nephi had always been an obedient good boy who loved his father and prayed to God very often. So the Lord heard him, spoke to him, and blessed him, and he grew up to be a wise, brave, and good man, and was a great comfort and blessing to his father and mother. So also was Sam, the younger son. I love that they call him the younger son. Sam was older than Nephi. That's weird. Anyway, Lehi and Sariah had 2 other sons born to them after they left Jerusalem, who were named Jacob and Joseph. But these 4 were all they had at the time we were speaking of. After Lehi and his family were camped in their tents by the Red Sea, he built an altar to the Lord and offered sacrifices to him, and thanked him for taking care of them on their journey. While resting there, the Lord told Lehi to send his sons back to Jerusalem to a man named Laban, who had a history of the Jews and a record of the sayings and prophets who had lived among them from time to time, and also the names of Lehi's forefathers, back to the time of Joseph, who was sold into Egypt by his brethren. All these writings were kept upon plates of brass which Laban had, and Lehi wished to have them, so that his children and grandchildren might know the commandments of the Lord and keep them, and so become good and happy. These brass plates contained many things which we have in our Bibles, such as what are called the 5 books of Moses, and the prophecies of Isaiah, portions of those of Jeremiah, and many others, and it was necessary that Lehi should have them. So he sent his sons back for them. Now Laman and Lemuel complained as much at having to go back to Jerusalem as they did at having to leave it, but they finally concluded they would go with their brothers Nephi and Sam to try and get those sacred records. To be continued. Sorry, I kind of flew through that. So that's basically the children's version of the Book of Mormon. I'm kind of object to the way that they labeled it. Like, the title was "Who Are the Indians?" I don't really appreciate that, because if you're going to go about like the children's version of the Book of Mormon stories, then you should say, Book of Mormon stories or something, like call it something else. I don't really like calling it Who Are the Indians. It's also a touch racist, isn't it? Anyways, a young missionary. I have no idea what this is about. We were at the house of a friend the other day when the conversation turned upon his son, who was absent on a mission preaching the gospel. Our friend and his wife, the mother of the young missionary, spoke with pleasure and pride of their absent boy, and of the cheerful and encouraging letters which he had written to them. They had recently met with some of the elders who had just returned home from preaching in the same country where he was, and they brought them good reports about the faithfulness and zeal of their son. Oh, that's sweet. We expressed the gladness which we felt upon hearing such news, and added that we should have been disappointed at hearing any other news than that, as we always thought he was a good boy. Oh, yes, said the mother. W, I guess was starts his name off, William? I don't know. Was always an obedient boy to me, and I never have had any fear about him doing well on his mission. I never knew that boy, said his father, to tell either his mother or me a falsehood. We never had any doubts about anything he told us, for he always told us the truth, and he was very industrious and trustworthy in all the business which he had attended to. These parents felt a confidence in their son which they could not have had if he had been in the habit, when at home, of telling lies and trying to deceive them and his other friends. In listening to their remarks, we were struck with the hopeful views which they took of his future, and they thought of the words of Solomon, "A wise son maketh a glad father." I like that, yeah? Good, let's hold up some good examples in the community. There is scarcely a little boy in this territory who does not hope that, when he grows up, he may be thought worthy to go on a mission, to preach the gospel, and we are sure that no boy, if he were sent as a missionary, would like to fail, and to be sent home as unfit for such a duty. This would be a disgrace which he and all of his relatives and friends would feel very sorry to see come upon him. Now, it is possible for every boy and girl to obtain a character for telling the truth and to behave themselves in such a manner that every person who knows them will love them. And a character for truthfulness and honesty is worth more than an immense pile of money or other things would be without it. Riches may take wings and fly away, or in other words, they can be lost. And then what a wretched condition a person would be in who has a bad character. But if boys and girls have not many fine things, nor very fine clothes, and are poor, yet have a good name for truthfulness, honesty, and industry, every person who loves goodness will love them. If their clothes are not very good, that will make no difference in the feelings of the saints towards them. They will look at their good qualities, not at their clothes. And if boys of this character should be called to go on missions, they will have the faith, prayers, and confidence of all who know them, and these will be worth more to them than fine things. Boys and girls, work hard to obtain a character for truthfulness, virtue, honesty, and industry, and this you will always find throughout your lives to be better than riches. I like that, be a good person. Anyway, another little filler here, except this one's a little more important to have shared. Now, our terms. The Juvenile Instructor is published semi-monthly at $3 a year, invariably in advance. Agents sending subscribers' names are held responsible for the amount and are presumed to have pay on hand, subject to order when forwarding names. We hope that all will readily perceive the necessity of this without deeming it too stringent, as the materials for this sheet have to be purchased abroad, with cash and freighted here, the payments for which must be promptly made. Wheat and other produce, when paid, will be received at market price in cash for the place where it is paid. Mr. William H. Sherman Logan will act as general agent for Cache County. Okay, I actually want to look up the conversion rate because that seems very high to me. Just 1866? Okay, $3 in 1866 is equivalent in purchasing power to about $58.07 today. Gosh. Yeah, so that's pricey. I mean, I know you're getting kind of a good a good amount for it, but like the actual price is really high. Like $3 a year, that's a $60 subscription today. I mean, would you pay $60 for a magazine? I understand why it was so expensive. They had to import the paper, and paper was pricey because of that. But at the same time, that's really expensive. So just wondering, out of curiosity, would you pay that for the Juvenile Instructor today? You get 24 issues, so two a month for $60 for your children? I don't know. I feel like a lot of people would say, I really don't have the money for that. You know? Anyways. All right, moving on. Voices from Nature. Coal. So the second one is coal. Last one is trees, I think, yeah. A venerable old lady has been requested to entertain us for a short time in the present paper. Dear Mother Earth, who has of late opened the records of her former days to the admiration and instruction of mankind. That is a really weird way of starting this article. Mother Earth is writing to us. Oh, of course she is. Huh. Okay, I will not lead you to the coral isles of the far-off sea, nor into the interior volcanoes, nor to the sand deserts of ancient Egypt, but to that pile of coal lying in your cellar to be burned in your stove, that you may feel warm in these cold winter days. For you see, coal does something else besides heating a stove, or driving a steam engine, or producing the useful gas by which whole cities are lighted up, and the darkness of their nights turned almost into the brightness of day. It tells us also a great deal of the earth before the present race of men lived upon it. My young friends will sometimes find on a piece of coal the forms of leaves and wood, and there are many specimens in various scientific collections on which the forms of plants have been preserved to a remarkable degree, but close examination has demonstrated the fact that they all belong to one great class, no matter in what country the coal is found. Coal is formed of plants, of a soft structure, like the fern, that had no visible flowers nor seeds, nor anything in common with our oak trees, beeches is misspelled, firs, pines, etc. The color of the coal and its blackening qualities show that it must have been brought by heat into its present state, but that by some cause the heat was prevented from consuming it entirely and burning it into ashes. Coal was not formed in one day, but it took probably thousands, perhaps millions of years to form a coal bed in the thickness of 5 or 6 feet, as it only consists of vegetable matter, consolidated by a pressure that man, with all his machines and engines, cannot produce. Okay, we can today, but it's irrelevant. Okay, how many generations of such loose and soft plants it must have taken to form such a coal bed? That period of our earth in which those plants were most abundant, of which the coal is chiefly composed, is called by geologists the coal period. Of course it is. Is that still a thing? A landscape in that period must have looked very different from any now upon the earth. If, instead of high and lofty mountains, there were only level swampy plains, the grass which grew upon those plains was from 10 to 15 feet high. The plants, which now scarcely reach the size of sugar cane, grew as high as our tallest of trees. And besides this, a tropical climate, without any apparent changes of the seasons, seems to have reigned all over the earth, favoring the uninterrupted growth of plants to marvelous heights. Just imagine for a moment, children, that you were going a May walking in the time of the coal period, the grass nearly as high as our houses, and as thick and wide as boards, canes growing as big as our biggest cottonwood trees. As beautiful as such landscape might look in a picture, it certainly would have been no home for man, for the hot and unhealthy atmosphere was often subjected to such sudden and terrible changes that our thunderstorms and hurricanes cannot be compared with them. The girl would have found no flowers to gather, no apples to eat, and none of our domestic animals, such as the horse, the ox, the sheep, the dog, etc., was known then. Only ugly formed monsters, skeletons of which have occasionally been found, swam in the water, crept on the ground, or chased through the air. The earth was not yet sufficiently developed to become the dwelling place of the crown of creation, the image of God, man. Holy cow. Men of science have often traveled thousands of miles to study the relics of an ancient nation, to discover some traces of its history, and to collect such remains of the past as great treasures in their museums. The hieroglyphics tell us of the old pharaohs, the ruins of Nineveh and Babylon, the long lines of kings and warriors. But a long period of our earth, nothing can give us record but the coal. And when you take a piece in your hand, remember that the plants composing it adorned the earth, when none beheld their beauty but the eye of him who watches through the ages of eternity, the never-ceasing changes of his creations. Carl G. Mazer. Holy flip. Okay, sorry, but what? Okay, I was with you for about 2/3 of the way through. Yeah, wow. Okay, the fact that these plants were ginormous, sure. But saying that none of our domestic animals were around, sure. Yeah, maybe they had some sort of predecessor, the predecessors of our domestic animals, sure. Predecessors of man, sure. But at the time they were just rats and stuff. Anyways, but they were little tiny mammals. However, what I object to was as soon as he jumps to was known then only ugly formed monsters. Okay, do not call an animal ugly. I don't appreciate that. An animal is an animal. It is not ugly. That's just very rude. But also, how do you know what they look like? You don't really. You know what their skeletons look like, but you don't know what color they were. You don't know the texture of their skin. You're just guessing. So, we still don't know for sure. We're just, making some educated guesses, which is pretty good at this point, but I'm guessing they're good. Like I said, nobody knows for sure. Anyways, but the way that they describe it, skeletons of which have occasionally been found, swam in the water, crept on the ground, or chased through the air. It makes them sound very primitive. Swam in the water, sure, yeah. Crept on the ground? Well, they walked, yeah. They walked like animals walk. Chased through the air makes them sound like they only fly for the sake of hunting. Yeah, they make them sound menacing. So I don't really appreciate that. And then saying the earth was not yet sufficiently developed to become the dwelling place of the crown of creation. They also describe this period as being swampy and unhealthy. What? It wasn't unhealthy. There was a higher amount of oxygen in the air, which allowed for the animals to become bigger. That's why they were so big. But calling that unhealthy? That's actually healthier than our earth is today. Especially the fact that you're talking about coal, which if you burn, releases ridiculous amounts of CO2 gas. Ridiculous amounts. And can absolutely darken the air. And the fact that they don't even mention that because this is a fossil fuel, coal was a fossil fuel, means that there is a limited amount on the earth and that maybe at some point they will run out. They don't even mention this. I'm absolutely flabbergasted that there's very little, awareness of the environment. I know that is part of the time. However, today we completely think of this differently. And it's shocking to me to see it, so blatantly described the way it is described here. And the thing is, Carl G. Mazer was actually a very well-respected person at the time. I believe he was a college professor of science. So, he knows a lot about it, but still, it's whoa, calm down, dude. Jeez. Ugh. I very much respect Carl G. Mazer as a person, but this explanation is ridiculous. This is very, very narrow-minded. That's crazy. Okay, simple science, rain. Okay, explain to me rain. I'm good with that. Yeah. Our last article on snow showed that it was simply frozen vapor. When the vapors which form the clouds are condensed or have become less in bulk, while the quantities remain the same, they fall to the earth in drops of water and are called rain. Vapor is formed by water being heated until it expands and becomes lighter than air, when it rises until it reaches a point above us, where the air is no heavier than itself, and there it floats, and when visible is known as clouds. Very good. You can see heated water rising from a kettle on the stove, and when the water in it is boiling or about to boil, it is of a whitish color then and is called steam, but is of that color because the cold air is condensing, for vapor itself is colorless. When the sun shines out strong, the moisture that is in the earth rises in the form of vapor, although you often cannot see it, and that is the reason why the earth dries so much quicker after rain has fallen on it, or when snow has melted. When the sun is strong, then when it does not shine out powerfully. Sometimes you can see the roads and fields when they are wet apparently smoking, as the moisture rises in the form of vapor. The rays of the sun and the warmth that is in the earth heat the moisture, and it rises very fast as vapor. But cold air near the earth condenses it slightly, and it becomes distinguishable to the naked eye. In the water in lakes, ponds, rivers, sloughs, and other places where it is collected in body, also throws off a part in the form of vapor, when heated by the sun's rays, which is returned again to earth and spread over its surface as snow or rain, fertilizing it and making it fruitful. What a beautiful provision of nature it is to water the earth! How wisely the Lord has ordained everything for the good of his children. When there is as much vapor in the air as it can contain, it is said to have reached the point of saturation, and when in that state, if it should be struck by a current of cold air, it would be condensed and become weightier than the atmosphere which was supporting it. Then it would fall to the earth in the form of rain. If the current of air which struck it was very cold, the drops would be frozen before they reached the ground, and then they would be hail instead of rain. The reason why we have hail more frequently in the summer than in the winter is that then the atmosphere is not generally so cold as to condense the vapor to form rain, and very cold currents of air are more frequent because of what is called rarefaction, or the heating of the air. These cold currents suddenly striking a rain cloud form hail or frozen rain. As the clouds are condensed, they separate into small particles, or drops, which are perfectly round, each drop being attracted towards a common center. When the clouds are very high, these drops unite in falling and form larger drops. Hence, when raindrops are very large, the rain is not likely to continue long, for the fact of the clouds being so high shows that there is a very large quantity of vapor in the atmosphere, and as the rain has been rapidly formed, the cause which produced it is likely to pass speedily away. On the contrary, if the rain clouds are flying low and the air becomes gradually cold, a drizzling rain begins to fall, when the drops are very small. This generally continues from some length of time, as the air is then very likely filled with vapor to the point of saturation. In very cold countries there is little or no rain. The cold is so intense that it freezes the vapor too quickly, to allow of its condensing enough to form rain, and then it falls as snow. That is the reason why it often snows in the mountains here while it is raining in the valleys, for the air is not so cold in the valleys as on the mountains. The reason why a south wind in these valleys is generally said to blow up a storm is that when the storm comes from a warmer climate than this, it brings a large quantity of moisture or vapor with it. Then, when the wind changes and blows from a colder region, it either freezes the vapor, causing snow, or condenses the vapor and causes rain. That's a very good explanation. I also appreciate it being more locally, explained, because most people who had this periodical was from Utah Valley area, that greater region. Anyways, that was a very good explanation. I appreciated that much, much more than the Cole article. Okay. Skating. It is very beautiful on a clear winter day or lovely moonlight night to see a gay party of skaters on the slippery ice, some circling around with graceful sweeps and others darting past the speed of a racehorse or cutting letters, figures, and devices on the smooth surface that appear marvelous. If we examine a skate, the first impression is that it must be very difficult to stand upon them at all. This is found to be the case at the first trial, but a little perseverance soon overcomes the difficulty. The next thing is to move in the direction you wish, while your feet appear to have a strong inclination to take you in a direction you are positive you do not wish to go. The reason this is that a very slight leaning of the body will cause a motion in that direction. Suppose you are about to put on a pair of skates for the first time. The first thing necessary is to see that they are fastened very securely to your shoes, which should be laced tightly to support the ankles. To obtain a forward motion on the ice, look in the direction you wish to go, for that action places your body in the position it should be. The toe of the skate must also be in the same line. The impetus is given by leaning the whole weight of the body on that foot, and at the same time pressing outwardly sharply on the ice with the inner edge of the skate on the other foot, along its whole length, keeping also on the inner edge of the skate on which you glide forward, preserving the same time a perfect balance. This motion, varied from left to right or from right to left or left to right, is all that is necessary. A little practice will enable anyone to do this. Increased confidence will come with renewed attempts, and no boy or girl need be discouraged by the partial failure of their first or second attempt. They should never forget that perfection in skating, as in everything else, is only to be attained by application and perseverance. These are very simple rudiments to the pleasant and healthful recreation which is practiced in nearly all countries where the weather in winter is cold enough to convert the surface of the water on lakes and ponds into ice. What is called fancy skating will be acquired by experience. Our young readers must be very careful, however, not to venture on weak ice at any time, nor on ice when the water under it is so deep as to endanger their lives, in case of an accidental tumble in. A ducking is bad enough without more serious consequences. L. I don't know who L is, but that was really, really interesting, and I love that they described how to do it and also gave some warnings at the end of some of the dangers that can happen if the ice is too thin. Also, at the time, it was quite common for ponds, rivers, lakes to freeze over in the winter. It is not at all common today, even in places that are reasonably cold. Global warming. It's a thing. Live for something. Thousands of men breathe, move, and live, pass off the stage of life, and are heard of no more. Why? They did no good in the world. None were blessed by them. None could point to them as their benefactors. Not a line that they wrote, not a word that they spoke, not a good deed that they performed could be recalled. And so they perished from the memory of men. Of what value is such a life? Its possessor has suffered the golden days of his probation to pass by unimproved, and his light has gone out in darkness. Children, you have life before you. Do not squander it foolishly. Make up your minds while young to live for something. Understand that you have a mission given you, and be determined to fill it worthily and well. Recollect that you cannot be truly great unless you are truly good, and make it your constant study to do all the good you can. You may be young and not widely known, but you can extend the circle of your acquaintance and influence by good deeds. And wherever you go, you can carry an influence with you that will inspire others with good resolves and a determination to follow your example. Okay, strange wording. Do this, and you will write your names on the hearts of your generation in letters that will never perish, and you will enter upon a career of ever-increasing happiness and glory. I do kind of like that. It's saying basically that you have a purpose in life. Like, find your purpose, yeah, and do it on purpose. I like that. To our readers, we owe an apology to our patrons for the non-appearance of the instructor at the stated time. We fully expected when we issued the first number to have our paper from California by the time we should need it for the second issue, but in this expectation we were disappointed. A delay occurred, which we found ourselves powerless to remedy. We hope to be able to avoid similar irregularities in the future and presume upon the indulgence of our friends to kindly overlook this want of punctuality and not permit it to detract from the interest with which they have manifested in the success of our enterprise. We shall furnish the back numbers as soon as possible so that subscribers can receive the 24 numbers for the year subscription. Yeah, and there were none missing in this one, which implies to me that they caught up. Yeah. All right, Sunday school party. Some little time since we received an invitation to attend a party of the teachers connected with the Sunday school of the 5th and 6th wards of this city, which was held in the 6th ward schoolhouse. It was gratifying to see so many assembled together connected with one school, in a part of the city that is not thickly populated and interested in the education and welfare of the young. An excellent spirit pervaded the party, and all enjoyed themselves exceedingly. From statistics read during the evening, we learned that the school had been organized some 18 months, and numbered about 150 scholars, with 12 male and 5 female teachers, under the superintendency of Elder Samuel L. Evans. The course of instruction comprises reading in the Bible, Book of Mormon, Catechism, etc., arithmetic and kindred branches, and music under Brother J. Edwards. The tonic sol-fa system is being used. Okay. Do a deer, a female deer, yeah. Okay. There is an examination every Sunday in the principles of the gospel and other subjects, conducted either by the superintendent or Bishop Hickenlooper, which takes great interest in the school. It is indicative of much future good to see the Sunday schools throughout the territory increasing in usefulness and continually adding to the numbers on their rolls of attendance. Interesting. They actually meet in the schoolhouse. Like Sunday school. Hang on, I'm very confused because they said Sunday school. So are they talking about regular school or Sunday school? Because they said reading in the Bible, Book of Mormon, Catechism, which implies Sunday school to me. But then they said arithmetic and kindred branches and music, which implies regular school to me. So I feel like it was a bit mixed back then. 150 kids, that's a lot. 12 plus 5, 17 teachers. I feel like that's actually a decent amount for the number of kids. Yeah? I don't know. All right. Moving on. The Jews. Okay, the last article was actually pretty decent. It was very factual. So let's hope that this one is too, crossing fingers. In writing about the Jews, mention will have to be made of other sons of Jacob and their descendants, as well as Judah and his descendants, for their history is nearly the same for several hundred years. Jacob was a man who feared God and kept his commandments. He had 4 wives, and Judah was the 4th son by his first wife, who was named Leah. Jacob's 11th son was called Joseph, whose mother's name was Rachel. They misspelled Rachel. Interesting. He was a good, virtuous boy, much beloved by his father, and the Lord gave him dreams showing him that he would become what he would become in future. In his honesty of heart, he told them to his brothers, and as these dreams seemed to declare that he would become greater than themselves, they were filled with envy and hatred against him. Some of them were for killing him, but Reuben, Jacob's oldest son, would not let them do so, and they sold him for a slave to some traveling merchants, who carried him away to another country called Egypt, where he was again sold to an officer of the king of that country. This officer's name was Potiphar, and he had a wife who was a very wicked woman. She saw that Joseph was good-looking, and she sought to make him commit sin with her. But he would not defile himself before the Lord, and fled from her, upon which she accused him of having sought to do the very wicked deed which she had privately striven to have him commit. Her lie was believed, and he was thrown into a prison, where the Lord showed his approval of the good and virtuous conduct of Joseph, by inspiring him to interpret the dreams of 2 others of the king's officers, who were confined there with him. Afterwards, when the king himself had a dream which troubled him sorely, one of these officers recalled Joseph's interpretation of his dream to mind, and told the king of it, who sent for Joseph, and had him brought out of the prison. He, being inspired by God, interpreted the king's dream, and told him that the Lord would bring 7 years of exceeding plenty upon the land, followed by 7 years of famine, in which all the plenty would be forgotten, and gave the king wise counsel how to act to save the people. For this the king placed Joseph next to himself, and made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. The story of his life is exceedingly interesting, and is to be found in the Bible. It shows how the Lord protects and blesses those who are good. During the time that Joseph was in Egypt, his father's family increased in numbers and prospered till the 7 years of famine came. After a time, when their provisions were nearly done, Jacob sent his sons to Egypt to buy bread, and they had to buy it from Joseph, their own brother, who was now a great man, though they did not know him, and in doing so the very dreams for which they had sold him into Egypt were fulfilled. At length he made himself known to his brethren, told them that God had sent him to Egypt before them to preserve his father's family on the earth, and bade them return home and bring his father with their wives and children and all that belonged to them down to Egypt, that they might be preserved through the great famine, 5 years of which were still to come. This they did, and thus by the direct providences of God was Jacob and his family led down to the land of Egypt, from which his descendants in after years had to be led forth through the Lord displaying his power in their behalf in a most miraculous manner. To be continued. Sure. This is a Bible story. That's in Genesis. Yeah, it's at the end of Genesis. But yeah, that's a relatively well-known Bible story. I'm not sure why history of the Jews. Sure. Yeah, it was history of the Jews, but it's also history of lots of other people. It's like all mixed together. So, yeah. It's okay, I guess. Anyway, so looking back, there was a lot of interesting information. A lot of it is very religion-centric, which I think is okay for a religious, newspaper. That's relatively appropriate. There was also a lot of science in there. Pretty much correct. I mean, mostly true. My favorite part is probably the Little George story. I don't always like the titles, Who Are the Indians? I don't appreciate it. Why don't you just say Book of Mormon stories? It's so much easier to say. Anyways, but a lot of the other things I think were very good. I was not a big fan of the Cole article, but and the poetry was just, it's not written for children. It's just not. It's written for the parents of children. It's like, this will be inspiring for children. No, especially not when you start with children obey your parents. Okay, yeah, I'm not going to read this. So, anyways, I'm just saying. The skating article was very cute and was very helpful, in fact. The rain article was very detailed and very interesting. The Jews, it wasn't really about Jews, was it? It's a Bible story. It kind of was, sort of. The Sunday school party I thought was really interesting because that gives us like some insight into like what normal life was like at the time in 1866. And, it just gives you a little bit of insight. It's like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Anyways, so in general, I think it was good. I think that there were a few tweaks that needs to be made in the future. Yeah, why don't you try writing it really for children instead of for the children's parents? I feel like a lot of these are a little more for the children's parents or for like the 12-year-old child. It's not really for smaller children. It's for older children. Yeah. In general, I believe the juvenile instructor was generally meant for Sunday school for the youth and children. But in later times, the instructor was then simply for Sunday school in general. It was also for adults. So when it becomes the instructor in like 1930. But anyway, I found that very interesting. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. And make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next video.